What is GERD?
Gastroesophageal reflux disease.
Is that just heartburn?
Yeah, it's heartburn, but it's kind of like chronic heartburn. So it's when the sphincter at the bottom of your esophagus.
That's not where your sphincter is.
Well, it's one of them. When it becomes kind of loose, a little lazy, and acid from your stomach acids kind of leaches up and splashes into your esophagus.
I see.
Which is not lined with kind of like refractory material to be able to handle the low pH of your stomach acids, and therefore it fucking hurts.
Yeah, acid reflux.
Yeah.
That's the same thing?
Yeah, and then GERD is just like the chronic condition.
I see. I've mentioned this before in our conversations, but I'm starting. I don't think I'm getting that, but I'm getting heartburn. Like more, like I never, literally like never had heartburn, other than maybe like a time or two before, like this past year. Been getting it.
Well, I'm sure it's not stress.
Been getting it more and more recently. Yeah, can that cause it?
Oh, buddy. Oh man.
Maybe that's also what causes my chronic headaches.
That too. What else you got?
Oh man, I got it all.
Yeah. It's all the shit. Like I don't know. It's an unhealthy population because we're all stressed and stretched thin and everything sucks. That being said, I'm going to have oh God, there it is again.
I could see that. Yeah.
Shit, man. And you know what's good for it? Ice cold vodka.
Yeah. That doesn't seem right, but go for it.
Listen, I'm no physician.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not a medical professional. So I don't know that it's not. Oh, God damn. It's like fucking hot poker. Jesus Christ.
Got your ass.
Gird the pain away. Gird the pain away.
Do you have any idea, and I don't want to, it's probably boring, I don't want to talk about it that much, but like every single day, I mean, I know CNN shows it, but certainly in the New York area, like I just see it every day, like fucking Cuomo's press conference, and like I guess today he was like really going off on Mitch McConnell for some reason. Do you know, did you see anything about that? I don't know what the background is about that, but I just like, I saw it for a second. He was genuinely angry. Like it seemed like almost like inappropriate. Like I feel like he like probably doesn't want to, he's losing his composure a little bit. You know what I'm saying? To be doing this at this venue. I don't know. Yeah. I have no idea what it was about.
Andrew Cuomo, aside from being a hatchet-faced goon,
yeah,
is I think a good rule for life is don't trust anything that Andrew Cuomo says. If his lips are moving, he is lying or grandstanding. And I think while his administration has done some good moves in this coronavirus disaster, we will probably look back on him the way that we looked at Giuliani during 9/11, where it's like, oh, they were the shit at the time, but like when you really look at the sum total of their work, it's bullshit.
Most people, I don't think, look at it like that, though. I think a lot of people still like Giuliani, or if the only reason that they don't at this point is because of Trump, like they still liked him up until 5 years ago.
I mean, look, I think the big attraction about Cuomo is the same attraction that the professional managerial class liberals like people like that anyway. It's just they just see a manager and they like that.
Sure.
And I mean, simultaneous to Cuomo, what he's doing right now, one of the things that he's done in the background is decrease Medicaid expenditure by the tune of $2.2 billion in New York State. And I don't need to explain that. Like, it's a choice that his administration is making to harm the most vulnerable people in the aspect of their lives that is most affected by the worst plague that human history has ever seen. And I don't mean that I mean that as far as reach. Like, I'm not a fucking historian, so don't call me.
Yeah, I would argue with this being the worst that human history's ever seen. But
as far as like global pandemic, like I don't think there's ever been like a global pandemic.
Sure,
like
and also, and who knows, before the advent of modern science and at a time when fucking we don't have any news reports that can give us advanced knowledge of this thing. No one's social distancing. Like who knows how deadly this thing really could have been.
Yeah.
I mean, we got the Spanish flu sort of as a something to compare it to.
I would like if there's anybody that knows more about this and comparing it to other things in human history, instead of me Googling it, I would appreciate if you DM'd Chris and told him about it.
Yeah, no, you can do that. I'm into that. I'm into talking about that kind of stuff, actually. Yeah. DM me cool stuff like that. DM Dwight fucking whatever bullshit you got. I mean, if you think about like I don't know, like this illness obviously is bad, but like I mean, the bubonic plague was like gruesome. Like that was like the way you died as that, and like the swelling of like your lymph nodes and all that sort of stuff that happened, and like that was a sort of grotesque death. That was a grotesque way to die.
Rough.
Very bad. No good, folks.
Yeah. I mean, there was also the series of diseases that wiped out most of the pre-Columbian population in the Americas. Like that was there were a series of them that happened at the kind of early modern era when the world was first becoming like truly connected. I mean, the Black Death, and then the follow-up outbreaks of that plague, and then other things that happened as a result of new groups of people coming into contact with each other. I mean, it's a serious thing that, I mean, now we're seeing it, but it is, I mean, disease happens through like intense moments of contact and cross-civilizational contact and things, right? So like it's part of the reality of like a globalized world. I mean, we've had a number of outbreaks of things that have happened in the last few decades as globalization and global trade has reached its apex, and this so far has seemed to be the one that has had the most like intense effects. But it could continue. It could, another outbreak like this could happen again. This is one of the reasons why we should never go to space.
What?
It's easily one of the first reasons nobody should ever go to space. The second we ever made contact with any kind of like, if there were to exist some kind of advanced life form out in the universe, either we or them would immediately get wiped out by huge amounts of disease. Just like bacteria you couldn't even possibly imagine existing, and there would be no immune system protection against it, and there would be no time to come up with a cure. It would just be instant civilizational-wide death. It's one of the many pitfalls of exploring space. Besides also that it's boring.
But we've had contact with Andrew Cuomo, and he's a fucking extraterrestrial.
And we may still die from that contact that we established.
It hasn't happened yet. You are right.
There's no way to know for sure.
You are right.
Did you guys see the thing about how nicotine could potentially prevent coronavirus?
Oh, hush.
You didn't see that?
Oh, hush.
Come on now.
Don't be spreading this fucking snake oil pablum on our show.
I feel totally vindicated, and so should you.
I should start smoking, huh?
I'm not going to start pretending that my various vices are somehow inculcating me against whatever virus. I might as well say, watching all of the Marvel movies prevents disease.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's no confirmed link, but it would be pretty cool.
Shane, have you gotten a disease since watching the Marvel movies?
It's true. I have, since I've started watching the films, I have not yet contracted the global disease. So
and every day that goes on that you don't get a disease bolsters that correlation.
That hypothesis. Yeah. I guess that is the sunny side up way of looking at things.
N equals +1 every day that goes. So I'm just saying, man, your argument's getting weaker as time goes on.
Well, they better start releasing more of these fucking movies, because I'm almost out of them.
They better not. Much like space, they're also boring.
I've never seen any one of those shits.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I want to watch again is Mad Max Fury Road. I keep thinking about that.
Awesome film.
But I can't. Nothing can peel me away from Stardew Valley right now. It's so good,
dude. I invoked Fury Road when I was playing Call of Duty, because now I've been goaded into being a gamer. And
yeah, you got that game, and I haven't even been playing with you because I've been obsessed with Stardew Valley.
Oh, dude, I don't know. I'm sure this doesn't matter if we put this in, but Jordan Yule was really nice to me. I realize in retrospect, because as soon as I downloaded it and got into the game, I was like, I would just get my brain splattered all over the battlefield as soon as I started. I mean, just useless. And so I just told Jordan, I was just like, dude, I can't. I'm dying here. And he was so nice. He was like, it's Russian bots, man. Like, they just blow you to smithereens. Now that I've played for like a week and I'm like getting better, I realized that I just sucked that much and had nothing to do with any automated killing algorithm or anything like that. I just
of course
sucked.
not. Yeah.
But I did invoke Fury Road when I was playing the other day, because I was just going ham, and then I said, I live, I die, I live again. It's helpful to have some little escapism during this whole shit.
Oh, dude, if I didn't have Stardew Valley this past week, I don't even know, man. I've put so many hours into that game already. And I bought a couple games because like they had Skyrim on like deep discount. It was like $15, so I picked that up. They had all 3 BioShock games all bundled together for $12, so I got those, and then I got Stardew Valley, and I haven't even gotten into any of the other ones. I've just been playing Stardew Valley. All you do is farm. All you do is like grow crops and like, you know, raise cattle and chickens and go fishing. It's just delightful, man.
That's wonderful.
It's so cool.
Can we just live that life? Like, I don't understand it. Why we were playing that because we want to be able to live that life, right?
I'd say I would like to be able to live that life, but yeah, I may be too lazy for it.
If I ever had to be a farmer, like I would definitely rather farm plants than animals because, you know, you think it's, you get this like pastoral idea of walking through this bucolic meadow and there's like goats around you and stuff. But I think the reality is that you're up, you know, at like 3 a.m, like struggling, trying to assist, you got
your arm in them up to your elbow.
Yeah, what the fuck? What's the word for a female cow? It's not a sow. That's a pig. Not a steer.
A cow is a female cow. The bull is the male.
Is it a steer? No. What the fuck?
Isn't a female just a cow and not a female one?
There's a term for it. Heifer. Anyway,
I'll be damned.
You know, just imagine, you know, it's like 3 a.m. and you're like trying to help a heifer give birth or something, and then you're like struggling because it's a breached birth or something,
right?
And you're just like afraid you're gonna kill it. Like that I imagine is probably more of the reality of what it's like to be a farmer. And knowing a few farmers, it seems exactly like that.
I'd be a bullet farmer.
Okay. All right. let's move on. I don't even know what it means. Or if I do, I'm worried that it's actionable. Parody, allegedly. Miss you guys.
Now when I was a young boy, about the age of 5, my teachers taught me I could be the greatest man alive. They told me I could change the world, be whatever I wanted to be. There was no one in the world like me. Every one of us was so unique. I'd not be an average man. No sir, I'd be no average man. So I had those big dreams.
Welcome back, everybody, to Eat the Rich. This is a show about our political economy, late-stage capitalism, and the millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations hell-bent on staving off its death rattle. I'm Dwight. Tonight we have with us Shane.
Oh, hello.
I know it's from something, I just don't know what. Or it's from nothing. And we have Chris.
What's up, guys?
So this is an episode that we have been talking about wanting to do for the entirety of the show's existence. Easily one of the worst families on planet Earth that has probably done the most effort and most effective manners in taking down a few of the major sectors that we have in the United States economy and weaponizing it not only for their own benefit and their class interest, but also just like almost out of like sport, like to really fucking harm people. We are talking about the Prince family as well as the Devos family. The Prince family comprises of Erik Prince, who we'll talk about as the founder of Blackwater, the private defense firm, as well as his sister, Betsy Devos, who's the current Secretary for Education in the Trump administration, who has properly done an amazing job at gutting that institution and transferring wealth into the ruling class's hands using our education system. What I think is overlooked, or at least maybe forgotten about in memory just because we're so overwhelmed by the shitty nature of these people, is the origin story of a lot of Betsy DeVos's money, which is through her husband via her father-in-law, who started Amway, which is, as Chris will explain in a moment, a multi-level marketing firm that is just huge. So why don't I turn it over to you, because it's
I mean, I don't really have anything to say about Amway in particular. Maybe you've got more to say about it than I do, but I mean, yeah, everybody knows what Amway is. I mean, we talked about It Works a couple weeks ago, Amway is that is the granddaddy of all pyramid schemes. You've heard of Herbalife, stuff like that. Everybody's heard of Amway, one of the most well-known multi-level marketing schemes, and that was founded by Richard Devos, who was Richard DeVos. I guess it's DeVos. Yeah, it's Richard DeVos, who is the father of Betsy DeVos's husband, Dick DeVos, or Richard Jr. And just to give a little bit of backstory, a little bit of primer into where this family comes from. Richard DeVos, when he died a billionaire, and he only just died in 2018. He was worth $5.1 billion. But I mean, this guy is for decades and decades, long time. When we talk about the idea of dark money, and you think of people like the Koch brothers or the Mercers, like this is one of those guys as well. He founded his own, conservative foundation in 1970, the Richard and Helen man, I can never say this last name correctly.
It doesn't matter. Don't
fuck
it.
I'm just going to call him Delos, from Westworld. So in 1970, fuck him. Who cares? He founded the Richard and Helen Delos Foundation, which was his own sort of conservative, little foundation for charitable giving. To a lot of stuff went to education, but a lot of stuff also went to churches and religious organizations. Quite often fundamentalist religious organizations with some very fundamentalist, very conservative ideas. He was a big contributor to the Heritage Foundation, also Focus on the Family, which is a very well-known fundamentalist Christian organization that promotes, just the whole, down the list of a lunatic, religious fanatic ideas, like creationism and, abstinence only, sex education, barring gay people from adopting children, school prayer, all that type of stuff, opposing pornography even, and gambling, and abortion, of course, abortion. He's also a big donor to the American Enterprise Institute, which is a fantastic neocon think tank, which helped to give us, among other things, the Iraq War and the troop surge there. He was a major donor to the Rick Santorum and the Newt Gingrich campaigns. He served as the finance chairman for the Republican National Committee. Here's a good one. He was appointed in 1987 by Ronald Reagan to the Commission on the HIV epidemic.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, we know how seriously Ronald Reagan took that crisis. This is kind of good. I saw this. He wrote a couple books. He wrote one book. You'll like this. It's called Compassionate Capitalism.
Oh, God.
It reminded me of what's his name, John Mackey, the Whole Foods guy. Yeah, this idea of conscious capitalism, or capitalism with a heart. And he had another book. This one's good. It's called Hope from My Heart, 10 Lessons for Life. And I looked this one up on Amazon. And I'll just, real quick, I'll read what it says here. It says, Rich Delos, the co-founder of Amway and owner of NBA's Orlando Magic, offers 10 lessons for successful Christian living. After more than 70 years of life, DeVos admits that he's made my share of mistakes, but most of the time, by the grace of God, I have managed to succeed. Grace may have had a lot to do with it, but DeVos also credits his unshakable faith in God and firm belief and hope. After numerous heart problems that accumulated with a heart transplant a few years back, DeVos began to see the superpower of hope as well as the true meaning of success. Here's a hint. It's not how much money or power you glean. And so, looking into this a little bit, it's it's really the backstory of this book that inspired him to his moment of enlightenment or whatever that led him to write this book was he was trying to get a heart transplant, but they denied him for one in the United States, and because of his age and because of his pre-existing condition, his diabetes and stuff like that, and so he had to go to the UK to get this heart transplant, and so obviously it's about money and power. You're only alive because you had the money and power to do that. You know what I'm saying? Your average person is not going to be able to take that trip over to the UK to get that heart transplant. We almost had him. I mean, luckily we only got 11 more years out of him. Here's a good one though. You'll love the name of his memoirs. The name of his memoir is Simply Rich.
Oh God!
She got a little double entendre, little double entendre there. Yeah, I like that. But his greatest legacy, of course, his shitty children. Who the rest of you guys will get into here. But he had 4 kids: Dan, Sherry, Doug, and Richard Jr., better known as Dick Devos. I don't know why I have so much trouble. I'm not usually a guy who mispronounces names, man.
This isn't the hill to die on. These people are
I just don't care. I don't care.
Yeah, fuck 'em.
Yeah, I don't give a shit. Fuck him. But yeah, Richard Jr., I believe, is the one who went on to take on, the family company, went on to be the CEO of Amway, who is now worth, I think, what was his net worth? It's like $25 billion or something obscene. But he is the husband of the current Secretary of Education, Betsy, and as you can see, with a father like that, you can see what kind of background he's coming from, what kind of ideology, he grew up in, and which one of you, Dwight, you're going to talk a little bit about Betsy, right?
Now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, sure, go ahead. that's it. That's all I got, man. The real meat and potatoes here. Really, the print side is the far worse side. I think just by fucking bodies.
Yeah.
Enabled by the money of these fuckers.
Yeah, exactly. It is the marriage of these 2 incredibly shitty families, and just literally not just the United States, but the whole world suffers from it. We suffer from it here with fucking Betsy and her bullshit, in the Trump cabinet, and then the global South suffers under fucking her brother.
I was looking at the list of largest private companies in America on Forbes. Amway comes in at number 44. And it's just funny, you think about these unbelievably rich people. Unspendably wealthy. Even for you or I or any of us to try to spend $1 billion, it would take, you couldn't even do it. You couldn't even spend $1 billion unless you, gave it to an institution that was going to invest it. But, if you needed to buy things like luxury goods or homes or something like that, you couldn't even get through it. It would take you that long. Anyway, but I was thinking about that because they're the 44th, Amway. And then number 41 is Gulf States Toyota. And number 37 is Menards. And number 31 is Racetrack Petroleum. It's just funny to me that all these other companies are just more unspendably wealthy. And,
because when I was a bit surprised to see when I was looking at Rich's net worth when he died, he was, I believe, at his death, the 60th richest man in the world, which is I saw I was 60, this fucking loser.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can do better than that.
So transitioning to Betsy DeVos, as we were talking about, she is the daughter-in-law of the founder of Amway, and she's gotten an enormous amount of her money from them and used it to enrich her and her cohort's class interests. And so I wanted to set it up by saying something, because it struck me when I was looking at her profile that she was the 11th Secretary of Education, and I was like, oh, it's funny. I just kind of assumed that cabinet position was much older than having only 11 people in it holding that position. And in fact, the first person that had been the Secretary of Education, it was only in 1953, I think it was, under the Eisenhower administration. So I started thinking about okay, you have all these cabinet positions, but what are they used for? And I don't think it's any secret that we get a good amount of understanding of political economy from Karl Marx, and some of his writings, or at least listening to people that had been influenced by his critique of capitalism. And I don't know that this is a direct quote from Marx, but the distinction that we look for in political economics is whose pockets does the value go into? And we know that workers create value, and Marx in his nomenclature called it surplus. So something that was produced can be consumed by one person, but as is often the case, one person can produce with their labor more than they can consume, so he used the term surplus. And we as a society get to decide how we organize and distribute those goods. So we ask the questions who produces goods? Who pays for the labor to produce it? Who receives the benefits of that labor? And then, obviously, most importantly, that we are currently discussing now is who owns the benefits of that labor, right? Under capitalism, capital, the people that have capitalism, the people that are the capitalists, get to own the surplus, get to own that excess value, and we call it profits. Now, the executive branch of the United States, the president, his branch, has oversight of the most most government agencies as far as like operations of those agencies go. That's why we've talked about in the beginning of the Trump administration, like Rex Tillerson came in and shuttered many parts of the State Department because they have in efforts to try to privatize things. It is to be said that no one monopolized this setup better than the Bush administration, Dick Cheney specifically. I mean, an administration run by the ruling class. But the opportunity is there for any member of the ruling class that seizes power and takes the presidency, like the Trump administration, like the Bush administration, is to install people in those cabinet positions from the industry that position regulates. And just, to name a few, we've got education, transportation, labor, agriculture, defense, energy, health and human services, etc. All of these sectors of the economy that these government agencies are there to help regulate or help facilitate. So now when thinking about Betsy DeVos, you have someone with their ruling class interests in mind, at the forefront of their mind. She's not an educator. She has no earthly business working in education except to further her class interests. And for her to help decide of the value that is created by those sectors, who produces it, who pays for the labor, who receives the benefits, and as we'll explore specifically with Betsy DeVos in education, who owns the benefits of the labor. So to give some background on Betsy DeVos, I'm going to read here quickly from a Forbes article from 2019, from last year. It just simply says, just how rich is the education secretary? And I'll just say this. Together, Betsy DeVos, her husband, and their 4 adult children are worth roughly $2 billion. And what's interesting, and I'll just read a paragraph or two from this article, it says, the key to untangling DeVos's empire appears to lie in a Securities and Exchange Commission filing from the late 1990s and early 2000s okay. when Amway's Asia Pacific business operated through a publicly traded subsidiary. And those documents indicate that Betsy's husband, Dick, and his 3, that's his name, not a description, also a description. Dick and his 3 siblings had equal interests in the subsidiary, an indication that they equally split their ownership with the rest of Amway. And at the time, 1/4 of the family's stake was 12% of Amway. That share is worth an estimated $1.3 billion. But assuming, which is also true, that they own 25% of the family's second largest asset, which is the Orlando Magic basketball team, that's another $300 million. And their slice of the family's portfolio of real estate, commercial real estate, private equity investments, mansions, and yachts makes up the rest of the education secretary's net worth. So about $2 billion. Again, fucking unspendably wealthy. But then we also say, what is in her class interests? She's a billionaire. Billionaires' interests are her class interests.
I could spend it. I think I could spend it.
You think so, huh?
Yeah.
Anything comes to mind?
If someone wants to give me a shot and let me try, I think I could do it.
Did you ever see Brewster's Millions?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Hell yeah. So we're going to skip around here a little bit, but just to bring us back down memory lane, I'd like to play quickly here let's just call it a greatest hits of her confirmation hearing for when she was nominated in 2017.
Would you be so kind as to tell us how much money your family has contributed to the Republican Party over the years?
I wish I could give you that number. I don't know.
I have heard the number was $200 million. Does that sound in the ballpark?
Collectively, between
over
my
the years,
entire
yes.
family, that's possible.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify the issue about whether you were on the board of your mother's foundation. I have 990s up through 2013 where you're listed as the vice president and a board member. So was that just a mistake on your part?
That was a clerical error. I can assure you I have never made decisions on my mother's behalf on her foundation board.
So the listing that you were the vice president of the board is incorrect?
That is incorrect.
Do you think that guns have any place in or around schools?
I think that's best left to locales and states to decide. The underlying question is...
You can't say definitively today that guns shouldn't be in schools?
Well, I will refer back to Senator Enzi, and he was talking about in Wapiti, Wyoming. I think probably there, I would imagine that there's probably a gun in the school to protect from potential grizzlies.
And I would like your views on the relative advantage of measuring, doing assessments and using them to measure proficiency or to measure growth?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I think if I'm understanding your question correctly around proficiency, I would also correlate it to competency and mastery, so that each student is measured according to the advancement that they're making in each subject area.
Well, that's growth. That's not proficiency. So in other words, the growth they're making is in growth. The proficiency is an arbitrary standard.
If they've reached a level, the proficiency is if they've reached a like third grade level for reading, et cetera.
No, I'm talking about the debate between proficiency and growth.
Yes.
And what your thoughts are on them.
Well, I was just asking to clarify then.
Well, this is a subject that has been debated in the education community for years. But it surprises me that you don't know this issue.
The Individual with Disabilities in Education Act, that's a federal civil rights law. So do you stand by your statement a few minutes ago that it should be up to the states whether to follow it?
The law must be followed, federal law must be followed where federal dollars are in play.
So were you unaware when I just asked you about the IDEA that it was a federal law?
I may have confused it.
And if confirmed, will you insist upon that equal accountability in any K-12 school or educational program that receives federal funding, whether public charter, or private?
I support accountability.
Equal accountability for all schools that receive federal funding.
I support accountability.
Okay, is that a yes or a no?
I support accountability.
Do you not want to answer my question?
I support accountability.
Okay, let me ask you this. I think all schools that receive taxpayer funding should be equally accountable. Do you agree with me or not?
Well, they don't. They're not today.
But I think they should. Do you agree with me or not?
Well, no, because...
You don't agree with me. Let me move to my next question.
It's bad. It's really bad.
I remember that. I'm trying to think of a specific moment. I remember that happening. I remember it being like something everybody laughed at. Like, look at how dumb this person is.
And here she is. And there was the vote for her confirmation in the Senate was a vote of 101 votes, because if you'll remember, 2 Republican senators, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, voted against her nomination. And there was a tie-breaking vote from old lemon face himself, Mike Pence, the president of the Senate, that had to come in and did the tie-breaking vote. So she was confirmed with a 51-50 vote. And interestingly, and she was asked about this, but I had to read this to you. Guys. This is from an Atlantic article from 2017 called "What Betsy DeVos Did and Didn't Reveal About Her Education Priorities." And I'm just going to scroll down to the middle of it here and read this one part, which is fucking stunning to me. According to... oh, fucking hell. This is from The Atlantic again. This is just so we can put a name to this. This is written by Emily DeRuy, D-E-R-U-Y, and says, according to the left-leaning Center for American Progress, DeVos's family has given nearly $1 million to the more than 20 senators who will vote on her confirmation.
Okay.
Including roughly $250,000. I see no problem here. Roughly $250,000 to the members of the Education Committee. The family gave Senator Tim Scott, the Republican from South Carolina, who introduced DeVos at the beginning of the hearing, nearly $50,000, and he served as a keynote speaker at last year's annual summit for the American Federation for Children, an organization she chaired. And then this is great. In a 1997 op-ed, Betsy DeVos defended her family's donations to the Republican Party at the time on the grounds that such money would promote its priorities of limited government and traditional values. And she published these words electively. "I have decided to stop taking offense at the suggestion that we're buying influence. Now I simply concede the point. They are right." Fucking stunning. God. And I just have to read this next part. "Some lawmakers have also raised concerns about her connections to certain industries that she would oversee as secretary, among them student loans. The Washington Post noted recently that DeVos has ties to a firm that loaned money to a debt collection agency that did business with the U.S. Education Department. That agency, Performant Financial Corp., recently failed to win another bid with the department, but as secretary, DeVos would be able to affect which companies win such contracts and how they're handled. DeVos said during the hearing that she and her husband would distance themselves from such education investments." I'll give you a fucking hint. She didn't. So one thing that I thought was interesting that we should pay a little attention to are some of her business decisions. So she is, an heiress, let's just call it.
The Prince family is not that level of wealthy, but the Prince family is somewhat wealthy in its own right, is it not?
Yes, yes, they are.
Yeah.
They are, but I mean, not even compared to what Amway has and what she has now.
Right. So it's not like she wasn't already, from a wealthy family before she married into one. So she was born and raised in wealth.
Oh yeah, she's never had to work. I mean, and she has been, and as we'll get to later on, I mean, entirely politically involved from being a kid. Mm-hmm. And she was part of the let me just tell you this right now. She was the Republican National Committee woman for Michigan from 92 to 97 and served as chair of the Michigan Republican Party from 96 to 2000. And she was the former member of the board of the Foundation for Excellence in Education. We'll get to that. But as a kid, she went to Calvin College in Grand Rapids and she did a degree in business economics, but during which she was part of the Young Republicans. She attended the 76 Republican National Convention. And so she's always been involved in Republican politics. But I'm just going to read, going back to this here, I'm just going to read the article title for this because you're going to get it. As far as her business acumen goes, it says, Betsy DeVos lost more on the Theranos investment than the average American will make in 100 lifetimes.
Oh, man.
Oh, my God.
I won't even read it, but you get the point.
Yeah.
And this, Chris, this one's for you. I know you're going to enjoy this.
Yeah.
I just labeled this with the caption, absolutely insane. It says, this is an article from 2017 from the New York Times, says, Betsy DeVos invests in a therapy under scrutiny. A group of brain performance centers backed by Betsy DeVos, the nominee for Education Secretary, promotes results that are nothing short of stunning. Improvements reported by 91% of patients with depression, 90% with attention deficit disorder, and 90% with anxiety. The treatment offered by NeuroCore, a business in which Miss DeVos and her husband, Dick, are the chief investors, consists of showing movies to patients and interrupting them when the viewers become distracted in an effort to retrain their brains. With 8 centers in Michigan and Florida and plans to expand, NeuroCore says it has assessed about 10,000 people for health problems that often require education. Is it time for a mind makeover? The company asks in its advertising. All it takes is science. But a review of NeuroCore's claims and interviews with medical experts suggest its conclusions are unproven and its methods questionable. NeuroCore has not published its results in peer-reviewed medical literature. Duh. Its techniques, including mapping brain waves to diagnose problems and using neurofeedback, a form of biofeedback, to treat them, are not considered standards of care for the majority of the disorders it treats, including autism. Social workers, not doctors, perform assessments, and low-paid technicians with little training apply the methods to patients, including children with complex problems. I can't even believe that this is even a thing.
I can't even make heads or tail. What the fuck is that? What even is that describing? What are they doing?
This is why we need more Patreon listeners so that we can go and get this treatment for ourselves and report back.
So they watch a movie. They have the patients watching movies, the test subjects rather, and then they interrupt them when they become distracted by something.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure they I didn't look this up, but I'm guessing they have something that maybe measures your gaze, and if they see your eyes start to unfocus on the movie and they can tell that you're lost in thought or something, they'll stop the movie and be like, hey, let's get you back to it. And then so theoretically that will increase your attention. It's fucking bunk is what it is. It's the road to Wellville. Right? It's fucking John Harvey Kellogg. It's Battle Creek Sanitarium. Anyway, so that's very interesting. But going to her time as education secretary, I think everybody might remember this, and I'm going to read about this so we can jog your memory. But there's an amazing clip where in literally her first days as education secretary after the inauguration, she was blocked by protesters from going into a DC area school. And this is from the Washington Post from February 2017. It says, the U.S. Marshals Service says it's providing security for Education Secretary Betsy DeVos after a handful of protesters prevented her from entering a D.C. middle school. Now, this is atypical because the secretaries usually don't get Secret Service, a U.S. Marshal Service. They usually have a staff of maybe some, bodyguards, something like that are on staff for the agency for which they work. And it's not like this was some threat that wasn't videotaped or something. In fact, let's play a little bit of a clip of it right now.
Betsy DeVos is not good for our kids. She doesn't care about black and brown lives. Come on.
If you're letting Betsy DeVos in public school, you're complicit.
Betsy needs to get in there.
Black and brown.
Keep giving money to senators and buying your way to the position. You should be so proud of yourself. Go back. Shame! 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 Shame!
It was on video. It was not confrontational. They stood in front of a door so that she couldn't go in front of us into a school, and we all saw that she was clearly not in any danger. It says here the move is unusual for the education department, which typically has a team of civil servants guarding the secretary, and for the marshals, law enforcement officers who are generally responsible for protecting federal judges, transporting prisoners, apprehending fugitives, and protecting witnesses. The last cabinet member protected by marshals was the director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, said Lindsay Donahue, a spokeswoman for the Marshal Service. That office ceased to be a cabinet-level position in 2009. Donahue said that for security reasons, she could not provide any information about the number of marshals assigned to DeVos, or say whether they're providing round-the-clock protection. It's unclear how long that arrangement will last. I hope I still get to it somewhere. I don't. It's not in this article, but they were saying how at a minimum for a period of the duration, it cost taxpayers $7.8 million for protection for her.
Nice.
I mean, enjoy. Oh, I'm sorry. I found it here. I found it here. During her visit to a public university in 2017, DeVos was confronted by around 30 protesters. She was touring an area designed to resemble a hospital ward at Florida International University, whatever the fuck that means. The following day, the U.S. Marshal Service said that after a threat evaluation was conducted in February, she would be given additional security, projecting a cost of $7.8 million between February and September.
Oh, no, I was just thinking about how in 1789, at the beginning of the French Revolution, like the French monarchy and aristocracy realized that they were so fucking hated by their own population that they had to hire foreign mercenaries to protect them. Who were then quickly dispatched by the mobs in Paris.
Oh, no.
And just the idea of, like, paying for this outsized amount of security for a fucking position like the fucking Secretary of Education. It you know, on the one hand, it's delusional on the, as you were pointing out, to the degree of, like, you know, the total non-threat that exists in her day-to-day life that she somehow is inflated in her mind because a couple of protesters showed up with a sign that said, like, you know, Betsy DeVos or whatever. And, like... but on the other hand, it's similar to another thread that we've pulled on a couple of times in the show. It's just like this weird recognition of how tenuous these people's positions are and how much they are genuinely hated by the mob. Like, without this giant security apparatus of a fucking, you know, armored convoy of the Tesla trucks, whatever, like roaming in and out of town to protect Betsy DeVos's war rig as she moves from public university to public university, talking about how she's going to strip it. If they weren't, you know, supplied with, like, you know, a legion of war boys to surround and protect her, that the fucking, you know, mob would just tear her limb from limb.
Allegedly.
What a joke. What a joke.
So there's no real chronology that I can really follow to present to you what's going to happen next. So I'm just going to start talking, and we're just going to list the things that she's done. This was interesting, what she said about historically black colleges and universities. She said, DeVos had released a statement calling historically black colleges real pioneers when it comes to school choice, causing controversy as some pointed out that schools originated after segregation laws prevented African Americans from attending other schools. DeVos later acknowledged racism as an important factor in the history of HBCUs. In May 2018, the New York Times reported that under DeVos, the size of the team investigating abuses and fraud by for-profit colleges was reduced from 12 people under Obama to 3, with their task also being scaled back to processing student loan forgiveness applications and looking at smaller compliance cases. DeVos also, I love this, DeVos also appointed Julian Schmoke, that's what a fucking weirdo, as the team's new supervisor. Schmoke was the former dean of DeVry. Schmoke
Schmoke?
SCH.
Supreme Leader Snoke.
Yeah, that's a fucking Star Wars bounty hunter. That's one of the guys in the background, like in that scene in Empire Strikes Back where you got Boba Fett and like IG-88 and then Schmoke.
Bring me Smoke. Send Smoke to target the Jedi.
I want him alive. Schmoke was a former dean of DeVry Education Group, which is one of the institutions that the team had been investigating.
Hell yeah.
The investigation into DeVry was not the only one stopped. Others included Bridgepoint Education and Career Education Corporation. The education department has hired more ex-employees and people affiliated with those institutions, such as Robert Eitel, a senior counselor to Devos, Diane Auer-Jones, an advisor to the department, and Carlos G. Muniz, the department's general counsel. Also reported by several news outlets was a sequence of payments made by DeVry to the Devos Foundation. What the fuck can you say about that, guys? What you need say nothing.
Seems above board to me.
Nakedly corrupt.
Yeah.
Nakedly corrupt. This is a goodie. In late May 2018, DeVos said that she believed it was a school decision on whether to report a student's family to ICE.
Oh my god.
Fucking unbelievable. It turns out, by the way, that's unconstitutional. Oh, you'll enjoy this. Whistleblower and former White House staffer Omarosa claimed that President Trump referred to her after she left meetings as Ditzy DeVos.
That's a pretty good. That's a good Trump nickname.
I'm sorry to bullhorn casual misogyny, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You could just hear him saying,
"Of course, of course."
Like,
there goes Ditzy. September 2018, DeVos lost the lawsuit brought by 19 states and the District of Columbia, which accused the Department of Education of improperly delaying. I'm getting too excited. I'm tripping up my words. Improperly delaying implementation of regulations protecting student loan borrowers from predatory practices, and she followed up in 2019. When she unsuccessfully attempted to cut federal funding for the Special Olympics. What the fuck? Also, she used her personal emails to conduct government business and didn't properly preserve them.
Lock her up. Lock her up. God damn it.
Now, the Devos Foundation, as we were talking about, that's what the DeVry Corporation was giving money to.
Right.
The Devos Foundation has donated to hospitals, nice, health research, okay, arts organizations, Christian schools, evangelical missions, and conservative free market think tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Of the $100 million the foundation donated between 1999 until 2014, 15 years, half of it went to Christian organizations. Organizations include Michigan's Foundation for Traditional Values, the Center for Individual Rights, the Acton Institute, the Institute for Justice, Center for Individual Rights, again, apparently. Michigan's Pregnancy Resource Center, I wouldn't go there. The Right to Life Michigan Educational Fund, and one of my favorites, Baptists for Life.
Wait, was on that list, was there a Center for Individual Rights and an Institute for Individual Rights?
No, there's a Center for Individual Rights and then another Center for Individual Rights for no discernible reason.
Okay.
There's a split in the individual rights movement.
There's a schism going on.
Yeah. There's the Center for Individual Rights and in parentheses Maoist, and then the Center for Individual Rights parentheses Hojaist.
And one of them I listed there, the Acton Institute. She was the chairperson, board member, and treasurer of the Acton Institute. What is that, you ask? I'll tell you. The Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty is an American research and educational institution in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And then it says here, which I didn't even look into, I don't care, but it says also an office in Rome, Italy.
Okay, all right, I like it.
Yes, the traditional values, sorry. Whose stated mission is to promote a free and virtuous society characterized by individual liberty and sustained by religious principles.
The two most contrary things in the world.
Which that doesn't make shit sense. It works to support free market economic policy framed within Judeo-Christian morality. Pablum.
Yeah.
The Acton Institute also organizes seminars, quote, to educate religious leaders of all denominations, business executives, entrepreneurs, university professors, and academic researchers in economics principles.
When they say all denominations, you think they mean Islam too?
I got my doubts. Christian motivation here. Educational activism we're talking about. In 2001, Devos listed education activism and reform efforts as a means to advance God's kingdom. In an interview that year, she also said that changing the way we approach the system of education in the country really may have greater kingdom gain in the long run, which is fucking insane.
Kingdom gain.
Yeah.
I'm always talking about my kingdom gain.
Yeah.
You know, no kingdom pain, no kingdom gain.
School choice. DeVos believes education in the United States should encourage the proliferation of charter schools and open up private schools to more students via financial assistance programs, often called vouchers. She has stated that education is a closed system, a closed industry, a closed market. It's a monopoly. Dead end. DeVos believes that opening up the education market will offer parents increased choice, a view that critics call blah, 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 it's privatizing the American education system. Here's the deal, guys. For those of you that don't know, a charter school is a private school that is having public money siphoned to it. A school voucher is the idea that you as a taxpayer get to choose which private school or charter school to send your child to. Now, what does that do? As she said, in her own words, I mean, she's being very thinly veiled, that the public education system is, or was for a long time, a closed system, a closed industry, a closed market. First off, it's not a fucking market. We need to educate our people. We need to educate our citizens. We need to educate future workers. We need to do it for the reasons that doesn't include them being workers. We need to do it for intellectual advancement being its own end. But the point of charter schools was this fucked up concept that conservatives and neoliberals proliferated in a time where they were trying to liberalize the education system. The public education system, free public education, is a socialist program in the United States. It is socializing the good of education. However, what the point of a charter school is that it makes funds that would otherwise be used to run a public school and give it to a private corporation. And the private corporation runs that charter school. And the point of their doctrine of school choice is nothing more than an opportunity to give your money to a private individual, to take your tax dollars that would otherwise go to ourselves and our children to educate them and giving that money to a private individual with very little public oversight of what actually goes into those education standards. It is stealing from you. There is no other way to say this, that charter schools is a way to steal your money and give it to somebody. Because like anything in a capitalist society, if there is an enterprise that is for profit, like these charter schools are, then all those profits are owned by the extremely small group of people that run it. That's it. And all those of your taxpayer dollars goes into the pockets of that individual. That's what school choice is all about. And I want to tie this into what we were talking about in the beginning. We were talking about Marx. The same questions, and I'll reiterate them. When we talk about how to organize and distribute the work and the value that we create as workers, and teaching is value, and teachers are workers, the questions we have: who produces it? Who pays for the labor to produce it? Who receives the benefits of the labor? And who owns the benefits of the labor? And in this case, the point of somebody like Betsy DeVos in the education secretary position is to try to privatize all of those public goods. Fucking nothing more. That's it. To take your money and put it into her and her friend's pocket.
If I can quickly add to that too, in effect, what it creates, right, which is the situation that we have, and it's becoming dramatically worse, is a tiered education system. And we're all aware of how that already works, like vis-a-vis something like higher education. But also, when you talk about like private elementary schools, private, secondary schools, private high schools, middle schools, whatever. In effect, what ends up happening, as you're pointing out, Dwight, right? Like when charter schools get that money siphoned off from the public fund, they get better funded than public schools do. But they also tend to cost money, so then only the only the children of affluent families, rich families can afford to go to the private school. So much like with everything else in this country, when we talk about like healthcare, it's a similar thing, right? Like if you have money, like theoretically everybody has access to all of these different things. Like, and that's where the idea of choice comes into. Like, wouldn't you rather have, like 3 or 4 different options of where to send your kids. What it actually creates is a tiered system where the children of the rich go to nice private schools that are fully funded, and then the children of the middle class, the working class, and those in poverty, right, go to public schools, which are often then underfunded, right? Because again, a lot of that money is getting siphoned off, and we all know of the various numbers of stories of, you know, teachers in fucking various areas of the country having to pay out of pocket for basic school supplies like chalk, let alone like, you know, the actual learning equipment or upgrading the school system or whatever. So it creates a class-based hierarchy of education, but it goes a little bit beyond that, right? Because it's not only just then a function of class, it also becomes a highly racial thing. Because when you talk about like school choice, that has for the longest time been the most thinly veiled attempt to return to the days of segregation. And so again, in effect, what you have in a lot of situations, and depending where you are geographically, right? Like as you talk about that class thing that I just mapped out, that ends up mapping onto race as well. So you have private schools that are, filled with white kids from the suburbs, and then you have schools in cities that are predominantly, Black, Hispanic, and other minority groups, other immigrant groups, and then of course, poor people of all kinds. But the point is, it is an attempt to replicate that system of segregation and exclusion in terms of who's really allowed into the big club. And in addition to that, a lot of these schools that are private schools are then like parochial schools or military schools, which have their own ideological bends towards education. So their goal there is not strictly to just like give you a well-rounded education or prepare you for higher education or give you kind of skills to get into a certain career or something like that. The goal of the school is to perpetuate fucking insane religious myths or to train, the next round of officers for the armed services. And so again, this whole idea of choice is really just a thinly veiled attempt to, reaffirm a lot of the awful racist elements, white supremacist elements, bizarre religious nutjob elements of the society at its core, and replicate that, through vis-a-vis socialization and education, and, getting these kids primed to be particular types of people and to have certain ideological predilections, right? The whole idea of school choice also goes hand in hand with all the bullshit around like, oh, should we teach, Darwinism next to fucking, I don't know, the theory that God, ate an apple and then had a baby and the baby was the planet or whatever the fuck it is, or that, these weird institutes where they show, early humans riding around on velociraptors fighting Ultron or whatever the fuck it is.
Dude. That's right.
That they have.
That's right.
Like that's what's meant when they say school choice. And the reality is, as with all socialized systems, right? The argument, that is given by individual rich families is like, well, I want to send my kids to the best school. If you just forbid private schools altogether, then what will happen as a consequence is those rich people will make sure that the public schools that their kids have to go to are the best funded that they can be, and that is an actual way to lift everybody up, even in a multi-class society. And that's shown in, social democracy experiments in like the Nordic countries and across Europe. I'm getting angry. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think what's so weird is that anybody that gets caught up in the kind of nuts and bolts of ed policy as far as weighing the merits of school voucher program or school choice or anything like that is, and saying like, well, there's actually benefits and we have shown, don't you want your kids to have the best education, be able to go to private schools? They're catching you don't let them drag you into an argument about its own merits because it's missing the point. The point of somebody like Betsy Devos in office for something like this is to take your money and to put it into the pockets of a rich person. That is fucking it. There is no other consideration or policy or anything that to say this is about education or providing children with better education. That is not what it's about. It's about enriching their class interests by taking your taxpayer money and putting it to the rich. It is socialism for the rich. Fucking period. No, don't let them try to talk to you about its actual merits on its own, because that's not even what it's about. It's about getting your money into their pockets.
And again, the last thing I want to say about this too is that even in a hypothetical situation where, like, this choice that they're offering was like a real thing, right? Like to say that there were a number of, accessible, divergent private schools in a certain area, which often that isn't even really the case. We all know schools are based geographically, and you go, your choice ultimately comes down to what's the closest or what's the most convenient, unfortunately for most people, just because of their work schedules. And, but even if there was this idea that like, oh, if we opened it up and suddenly there would be like great schools on every corner and you could really like go and evaluate the various things of each one, it would still be a class-based choice system where if you didn't have the money to go to the fucking private schools, you wouldn't have a choice. In the same way that the whole idea of like health insurance is a choice, it's not a choice if you're broke. If you're broke, you either get the junk insurance or you get no insurance and you end up in the fucking ER room. And it's the same thing with education. If you don't have the money, you don't have any choice except to send your kid to whatever the closest, most available public school is that still has 4 walls and a roof. That's it.
Yep. I'm skipping like 2 pages. In interest of time, I'm skipping like 2 pages of stuff that I have here. I just want to highlight the one last thing about her specifically. There's so much to go into, and maybe I'll do like a separate Patreon thing about it. But this is, I think, one of the most uplifting things that we could say about her, which
Okay.
I really enjoyed this, which is from August of 2018, which it says, a vandal, and I will argue a hero, untied Betsy DeVos's $40 million yacht that had been moored at a marina on Lake Erie, causing it to sustain $10,000 in damages. The 50-meter vessel is one of 10 yachts owned by her family.
Obscene.
And then this was an just fucking obscene. And it says here, the craft is registered in the Cayman Islands, so it is not subject to state property tax. Which is so funny that there's a Cayman Islands flagged vessel sailing on Lake Erie. It's like not even close to salt water, and yet. So that's Betsy DeVos, and I will say this now, and I just want to this won't make this episode timeless, but just something I wanted to say on ed policy and what's going on right now with coronavirus and with kids specifically is that the importance of youth agency. There's supposed to be this facade that there's a hope to increase participation of youth in the ways that they spend their time, and I think what the coronavirus crisis has proven is that that is not the case. It's been 6 weeks just now, and, only just now, 6 weeks after, coronavirus and all that stuff, the Department of Education in New York City has put out a format for students to even tell the DOE how they're even doing at educating them. The regulation is late, and the kids need help now, and the inaction is completely stopping them from what they need. I mean, I'm hearing a lot about kids that are depressed. They don't get the socialization that they need. They're struggling, as well as the teachers are struggling to teach in a format that is completely unnatural to everybody. It's totally fucked up. It's beyond just them missing prom and shit. I mean, there's children that are sitting at home with stressed out parents that have no idea how to, they're trying to like learn on Zoom and shit. It's absolutely insane. And ed policy had no contingency for this. And I think most importantly that young people need to have a say in how they spend their time. Kids can do all the shit that we can do as adults if they're given the tools. What is cool, and I'll just highlight one organization that's doing some amazing shit, is that youth organizing is happening, but they need the help of adults, and not just the ones that are interested in helping them. They need the help of all adults, and Teens Take Charge as an organization in New York City that I highly recommend you check out, because that is an example of the kids making their voices heard and expressing their needs. And one thing that I learned from Capitalism Hits Home, one of my favorite podcasts, is that being a child is one of the greatest indicators of poverty in the United States. Literally just your age. And it is 1 in 6 school children that are fucking hungry, which is a man-made economic famine. So having some fucking ghoul like Betsy DeVos in charge of education in the United States, what is blowing my mind is that nobody in the Senate called it for what it was during the confirmation hearing, because it's not about ed policy. You think she's there because she's going to help fucking, map out how to better educate our workers and the working class in America? No, she's there. She doesn't know shit about education, but she knows a lot about excelling her class interests. So, fuck her is my thesis. So with that being said about Betsy DeVos, Shane, I believe you have a bit of information about her sweet brother.
Yeah, Erik Prince is a thoroughly evil individual. Probably one of the most singular, like, worst people I've probably ever become aware of. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with him. He was most notoriously the founder and CEO of Blackwater, the mercenary army that, let's just say, played a role in the Iraq War. If your, like, mercenary army has its own, like, subhead on the Wikipedia page for human rights violations in post-invasion Iraq, then it's probably not a good sign. I mean, before I get too far into him, I should just make a note that pretty much the entire reason that I became aware of this guy, and I would imagine that a lot of the general public, for those who are aware of him or you know, had been made aware of him during the height of his sort of scandals, I'm deeply indebted to the journalist Jeremy Scahill.
Fantastic.
Who worked for The Nation, Democracy Now!, The Intercept. He has a great podcast too, Intercepted. I'm a little bit behind. I haven't listened in a long time, but so most of the material that I'm going to be kind of going over today is stuff from him. He did a book on Blackwater titled Blackwater.
He did another book called Dirty Wars.
Yeah, Dirty Wars,
well,
which
yeah.
also had a documentary film, which is fantastic. And these were books that, like, I read in, you know, my late teens, early 20s, and were highly influential on my kind of general turn and sort of equip me with a lot of knowledge to help kind of construct an anti-imperialist, anti-war worldview. So I highly recommend those books, and I'll be reading from primarily the book on Blackwater and a few of his other articles. Yeah, I guess it makes sense to very briefly talk, since we were talking about mostly the Devos family, very briefly talk about the Prince family side of it. So Edgar Prince was the father of Erik Prince and Betsy Prince, and later Devos, and a couple of other members of their weird evangelical brood. It shouldn't surprise anybody that similar to you know, the Devos family, the Prince family has been this kind of in the fulcrum point of American capitalism and American evangelicalism. Mm-hmm. The dad, he founded, like, I was trying to get information on it. I mean, I was mostly focused on Erik, but the Edgar Prince, he was like an industrialist from the Midwest, from Michigan, and he founded the Prince Corporation, which was like a manufacturing supply company or something. I believe they're still in existence today. They eventually, when the father died, I'll get into that in a second, it got sold off to another company. I tried to look into it now. I believe they sell, like, agricultural manufacturing supply, so mostly like animal feed and shit like that. Very weird stuff. But among, you know, the other feathers in his cap, Edgar Prince also co-founded the Family Research Council, which the name should give you everything and would need to know about it. I mean, obviously, like Chris was talking about with the Devos, you know, family's involvement with evangelical organizations. This was like a think tank, research, pressure group that, if you look into what they have attempted to do since they were founded in the 1980s, it's the entire laundry list of every stupid evangelical thing that, you know, tries to destroy people's lives or control people's, you know, sexuality and reproductive systems and all that kind of stuff. So pretty evil, nasty man. Then he had a heart attack and died, which is funny.
Nice.
He died in a elevator, which to me is for some reason really funny.
Hope he was going down.
I was trying to get a sense of what his net worth was, you know, as we were trying to suss out and talk about, like, you know, the Prince family, like Betsy's previous wealth. I know that after he died, there was a moment, because Erik Prince was he was an army guy, he was in the Navy SEALs, military man, and so after his father died, there was this brief moment of like, oh, maybe are you going to come take over the company? And he turned that down, instead choosing to continue his military career, and so the company the Prince Corporation was sold for $1.35 billion.
Jesus Christ.
And so he had 4 children, so you can imagine that they probably made off with a decent chunk of that individually to kind of start on their fame. And so maybe just to get into Erik a little bit more, I'll read here, again, this is from that book Blackwater by Jeremy Scahill. It gives a little bit of a background and understanding of how he came about to the notoriety of the private military contractor that he became. So this is reading from the book. Erik Prince adored his father and strived to follow in his footsteps from the time he was a child. Erik was an active youth, played soccer, track, and basketball at the Holland Christian schools he attended as a primary and high schooler, and for which his family also provided financial support. Holland, by the way, is the name of the town in Michigan where the family was located. Prince's deeply religious high school featured pages upon pages of Bible quotations and incantations throughout its yearbooks. One year, the third page of his yearbook intoned, quote, "In God's kingdom, all of life is living out the meaning of the new humanity in Christ. This takes all the inventiveness, creativity, and discovering that we can do," end quote. So this also gives you a sense of what we were just talking about, what parochial school and private schools are really about.
Fucking
at the end
creepy,
of the day.
dude.
Gary Bauer recognized the special bond between Edgar and Erik. Erik Prince, Ed and Elsa's only son, and one of the FRC's first college interns, certainly did know him well. In addition to his work with the Family Research Council, Erik spent his college years increasingly taking up his father's mantle. He entered the Naval Academy after high school, intending to be a Navy pilot, but resigned after 3 semesters to attend Hillsdale College, a Michigan Christian liberal arts school that preaches libertarian economics. The campus was rated the most conservative in the country in a 2006 Princeton Review poll. So, also just as a little side note, there's a online course offered at Hillsdale College that's called like Freedom and the Constitution or some shit. Yeah. And I got really drunk one night and signed up for it just as a joke because it's like a free course you can do. So I've been constantly getting these email updates from Hillsdale College. I mean, it's like basically like a series of YouTube videos you can watch that are all talking about how, the Constitution is sacred and socialized medicine is a backdoor for Karl Marx to take away your hamburgers and shoot your parents in the face or whatever.
Nice.
Anyway, continuing on with Erik. He was a smart guy and pleasant to be around, and he's well-spoken, said Erik's professor Gary Wolfram. What's good about him, he understands the interrelationship between markets and the political system. Prince also had a thirst for adrenaline-pumping action and initially satiated it by becoming the first college student to join the Hillsdale Volunteer Fire Department. When you've been on a fire an hour and a half and the crowd's gone, some of the guys want to sit on bumpers and have a soft drink, recalled firefighter Kevin Pauken. Other guys will be rolling hoses and picking up equipment so that you can get out of there. That was Erik. As he grew older, Erik became increasingly active in right-wing politics, landing a 6-month internship at George H.W. Bush's White House.
Oh, boy.
It was during this internship that the 19-year-old Prince made his first political contribution, giving $15,000 to the National Republican Congressional Committee.
Oh, Shane, you didn't do that when you were fucking 19? You didn't give? You didn't have 15 grand to give away?
No, when I was 19, baby, I had better things to spend 15 grand on. I'll just say that. Since then, Prince and his late wife Joan and current wife Joanna have given $244,800 in contributions to federal campaigns, not a dime of it to Democrats. He has supported Jesse Helms, Ollie North, Richard Pombo, Spencer Abraham, Dick Chrysler, Rick Santorum, Tom Coburn, Tom DeLay, Jim DeMint, Mike Pence, Duncan Hunter, and others.
Different eras. It's nice to hear some of those old names.
Yeah, exactly. Here, I'm gonna skip a little bit just to get more into what his politics are in here. In 1992, he became enthralled with the renegade presidential campaign of Pat Buchanan, who challenged President Bush for the GOP nomination, running on an extreme anti-immigrant, anti-abortion, anti-gay platform. Prince's backing of Buchanan led the then 22-year-old into a feud of his own with his sister Betsy, who was working for Bush's re-election as chairwoman of a local Republican district. Erik and Edgar, however, didn't seem to care for Bush. Quote, "I interned with the Bush administration for 6 months," Erik told the Grand Rapids Press in 1992. "I saw a lot of things I didn't agree with. Homosexual groups being invited in, the budget agreement, the Clean Air Act, those kinds of bills. I think the administration has been indifferent to a lot of conservative concerns." So I'm gonna end it there. There's a lot more of stuff like that, but just as a quick primer to maybe some of our younger listeners who don't know who Pat Buchanan is.
What a gem!
Just insane right-wing nut job. The real precursor, predecessor to the kind of giant evangelical turn that happened with Bush Jr. and the kind of insane anti-immigrant, xenophobic base of the GOP party, or openly in those cases. Element of the GOP party today. And just as a little side note, I occasionally look at Pat Buchanan's blog, because he basically became a political non-person after that failed bid, and sort of drifted into obscure, just right-wing crankery, but without the charisma of like the other media figures who have done that. But just as a quick aside, if you go to his blog and you look at his most read column and his highest rated column ever, just to give you a sense of who this guy is, it's from 2008, March 2008, and it's about Obama, and it's called A Brief for Whitey. And you can read the entire thing.
What's it called?
A Brief for Whitey.
Oh, I see.
And I'm not gonna get too much into the details here, but it's a fucking obviously insanely racist op-ed
sure.
that repeats every racist argument you've ever heard about Obama. It was like right after the fucking Reverend Wright thing happened, and so a lot of the conservative press was in uproar about that.
He still has it published on his website.
Oh no, yeah, that's what I'm saying. He has it proudly listed as his like top rated column, and the rest, by the way, also the website's in Comic Sans, which is hilarious to me.
Yeah, what the fuck is this?
But
it's
again,
like a GeoCities site.
The whole purpose of this little mini detour is to say, in 92, at the age of 22, fucking Erik Prince saw this guy and was like, "Oh, this guy's got some. I like this guy. I like the direction he's going in." And there's also a bit that Scahill notes in here that he and his wife, or his wives, have contributed huge amounts of money to the Republicans. And Scale has mentioned a couple of times that he's never given to Democrats, which is important in the sense of understanding eventually where Prince goes, right? Because when he starts his company in the 90s, his mercenary company, right? Like, he ends up becoming intertwined with the American imperial industrial complex. And so that's a complex that both Republicans and Democrats feed into.
Absolutely.
And so there is a logic, right? If you're just like a corporate lobbyist guy, or if you have the kind of strategic thinking of a corporate lobbyist guy, there's a logic to giving a little bit to both sides, because, you know that no matter who's in power, you could probably get some of your imperial agenda across. But ultimately, for him, right, it's not just about that. There's also this deep, insane right-wing fucking evangelical thing that's attached to it. And so that's why he's resistant, even in a kind of smart business way, and giving any money to the Democrats, and he gives all to Republicans. To continue on that theme, this is from later in the book, just giving some context to Blackwater. Blackwater alone has won more than $1 billion in publicly identifiable U.S. government contracts under the War on Terror, not including much of its black or urgent and compelling need business or its work for private actors. And its rhetoric of saving taxpayer money through free market efficiency seems increasingly empty, with the U.S. government unable or unwilling to effectively tabulate its own expenditures on private security and military services. A worldwide estimate proves even more elusive. In 2003, just as the Iraq War was getting underway, and before the major mercenary boom had begun, P.W. Singer estimated the value of the private military industry at more than $100 billion globally. Homeland Security Research, an industry tracking company, estimated that governments and businesses globally spent $59 billion in 2006 to fight terrorism, a figure that does not include many passive private security services that represents a six-fold increase from 2000. What this means in practical terms is that the rebranding campaign is enabling the mercenaries to affix a permanent sieve to the most lucrative feeding trough in the world, the national budgets of the United States and its war-making allies. These services are no longer reserved for unstable nations struggling to maintain power, but are being welcomed by the great powers of the world as an integral part of their national forces. Moving a little bit ahead here in the book, what is particularly disturbing about the expanding role of Blackwater specifically is the issue of the company's right-wing leadership, its proximity to a whole slew of conservative causes and politicians, its Christian fundamentalist agenda and secretive nature, and its deep and long-standing ties to the Republican Party, U.S. military, and intelligence agencies. Blackwater is quickly becoming one of the most private armies in the world, and several of its top officials are extreme religious zealots, some of whom appear to believe they are engaged in an epic battle for the defense of Christendom. The deployment of forces under this kind of leadership in Arab or Muslim countries reinforces the worst fears of many in the Islamic world about a neo-crusader agenda masquerading as a U.S. mission to liberate them from their oppressors.
I can remember I guess it was a few years into the Iraq War. I guess it probably would have been around 2005, 2006. I'm not sure exactly when, or if maybe they were there all along. I'm not exactly sure at what point, the mercenary armies came in. But I remember, like, I was in high school and I used to see, like, on the television, and they'd talk about, like, the number of deaths, that day or that week or whatever, and they'd say, like, 7, Marines and 3 contractors. And without ever really explaining what that meant, I was like, the contractor? What do you mean, like a plumber? Like, what the fuck does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they never really explained that, and it took me, like, I think that they sort of, like, kept that vague on purpose, because I remember at that time, like, the idea of something, and even to this day, the idea of something like a private mercenary army, it's just like, I feel like any reasonable person can look at that and just say, this fucking shouldn't exist.
And it's right. Not, Shane, you probably know more about this than I do, but it is far from a recent development.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, the Hessians were German troops that were hired by Washington's army to go fight somebody. I don't know.
That was in the Revolutionary War.
Well, the American.
Yeah, no,
rebels,
I'm fucking kidding.
I mean, obviously, look, here's the deal. Like, there have always been mercenary groups and private security groups of one kind of another, stretching back to the beginning of warfare. What makes Blackwater a little bit different, and what I think that passage from Scales' book really highlights, is the fact that during the height of the War on Terror in the Bush administration, there was a real attempt to push the total privatization of America's imperial army. And not just in the kind of light touch way, or whatever fucking phase of it we've moved into now. It was talking about, like, the actual, like, management of the occupation of Iraq.
Oh, sure. Right? And there's there at the beginning of the Trump administration, there was a big push to try to do that again. I remember Bannon specifically wanting to hand, the administration of Afghanistan over to Erik Prince and whatever the fuck he calls his company now.
Yeah, they wanted to make him viceroy.
But it's insane.
But
it's unbelievable.
To what you were talking about, Chris, I mean, look, in terms of, like, seeing, the news reports of, like, contractors dying in Iraq, I wanted to quickly go over at least, like, the 2 big incidents that were the news splashes. There were a lot more, and honestly, like, the stuff with Blackwater could really be maybe its own episode, or, we could go maybe do, like, a follow-up or something, because there's so many awful scandals that are tied to that company and its, human rights violations, its mismanagement of things. I mean, there were Blackwater troops called in to fucking do policing in Katrina, and the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah, in New Orleans. There's, like, a million different stories, but the 2 big ones in terms of the war in Iraq was in 2004, in the sort of immediate post-invasion period, there was an attack in Fallujah, and Fallujah became kind of like the big meat grinder of the Iraq war. There were a number of battles that were fought there, and in this particular one was one of the first ones where on sort of American television screens and in the American press, it became apparent how many private fucking military contractors there were in Iraq, because I think 4 of them were killed by insurgents, and their bodies were hanged in publicly and paraded by the insurgents.
I remember
and so
that.
As a result of that, right, like, what you would think would be the normal response, right, is a lot of people who, had family members who were, like, private contractors of a variety of different types. Like you were saying, Chris, you had plumbers, you had all kinds of civilian contractors there. People really got skittish and scared. A number of countries, I believe Germany and a few others who had contributed some kind of private, contracting work out in Iraq, like, all withdrew after that point. But Blackwater actually used that as a big PR coup. And, there's a great chapter in this book about the work that Prince and his lobbyists did. And it's like, it's a fucking rotating door of names that just keep cropping up again and again and again that are attached to the right-wing angle of the Imperial American project. But they basically were able to take that moment, and instead of it being this, like, reflective moment of being like, what the fuck is going on in Iraq, they were able to use it as a way to be like, see, we need even more mercenary forces in Iraq. And as a result of, how notorious those images became of the Americans being dragged, it actually drove up the prices of the individual contractors that were fighting over there. And so that's when Erik Prince and Blackwater really started to peel off, like, the trained security intelligence operatives who were already in the armed forces, because, I think at some point it was around like $1,500 to $2,000 a day you could make as a military contractor working for Blackwater after that time, because of of how they were able to use those images in the press to their advantage. And it inspired a lot of guys who, had maybe gone out of rotation, who were looking for a little money. People were still in, but a lot of people in the military were, really pissed off by that, especially the more ideologically zealous ones. The people who are like, oh, our boys are dying over there. So a ton of people started joining Blackwater after that, and they were able to leverage their sway in the administration to add, Blackwater security forces to, all types of operations in Iraq. The real blow-up one was in 2007, which was probably the thing that if people know the company still, that this is what they remember, which was the Nisour Square massacre, during which a group of Blackwater soldiers, about 5 or 6 guys, just opened fire on this public square in Iraq, and they killed, I think it was 17 people and injured maybe 20 others, just like random fucking murder. Just totally open fire, holding down the trigger until the clip is empty type thing. And that's when there was kind of the big PR backlash, because that was also obviously at the height of like the decline of the domestic support for the war. That's when a lot of the press had finally stopped being the cowardly, sniveling, not going to say it, but the bad people that the American press had been in terms of their full-throated support of the war. And that's when they finally turned around. And so that kind of dovetailed into it. That eventually led to a number of things, including court-martials for or not court-martials, but criminal cases for those guys, because it introduced as well the question of, do private military contractors have to adhere to the same rules as the United States military? And obviously, the United States military is like a fucking bludgeoning weapon in the way that it's been used in these imperial wars, but still there's some kind of idea of accountability. Now, in a private military force, the question is, was there? And there was this like big fucking legal battle over that for a long time. Not going to go into the weeds of it. A lot of this is like very available as public record stuff. But the basic headline is, as a result of this and dwindling general support, Erik Prince eventually stepped down from Blackwater in 2009. And in part, it seemed obvious that he was trying to distance himself from the fucking PR disaster that Blackwater had become. Blackwater then changed its name a couple of times. It's now called Academy.
Awful name.
For some reason.
Awful name.
But it shifted, obviously the Iraq War as a, American project died down to lesser numbers. But Erik Prince basically got off scot-free, is the point. Whereas a number of the guys who were involved in that massacre eventually did have to come to task. One of them was convicted of murder. I think the other ones were convicted of manslaughter. It took all the way to 2014, so 7 years after the massacre happened. There was finally some semblance of justice for it. Erik Prince continued to, profit off of his endeavors, and he eventually branched out and made a number of other moves within the private military contracting world. Some of this is like very black ops stuff. It's very obfuscated. He was outed at one point in 2009, and this seems to be right before he stepped down, so it might have been in part the motivating factor, the last kind of straw, but he had been used by the CIA to conduct a number of their, black operations that they were doing in Iraq and all over the war on terror. Or rather Blackwater was. Erik Prince then went on to, again, be a part of a number of kind of secretive, weird projects, including a project to fund a private army for the UAE in 2011, right around the time of the Arab Spring, in which, a series of autocracies in the Arab world fell in quick succession because of popular revolts. And so a lot of the rich sheiks or whatever started to get worried and thought, hey, we might need a security force just in case, the people get a little bit, mad at us. And so Erik Prince stepped in. Now, interestingly, when he stepped in to do that for the UAE in 2011, he hired Colombians to do it. But the general reasoning was, you cannot trust Muslims to shoot on other Muslims. So you have to hire non-Muslims.
Christ.
And import them in, basically, to then be exactly along the lines of what we were talking about vis-a-vis, like, the fucking French Revolution, right? Now, to that end, there's an additional motivation of why he said, and why he had a personal distrust for Muslims. And I would like to bring this up. I'm just going to read very briefly from it in the interest of time, but here's a piece, again by Jeremy Scahill for The Nation from 2009. Blackwater founder Erik Prince implicated in murder. So, it says everything you need to.
Oh,
but
God.
here's the real meat as it regards to the material we were just talking about in terms of what his post-Blackwater plans were. A former Blackwater employee and an ex-U.S. Marine who has worked as a security operative for the company have made a series of explosive allegations and sworn statements filed on August 3rd in federal court in Virginia. The two men claim that the company's owner, Erik Prince, may have murdered or facilitated the murder of individuals who were cooperating with federal authorities investigating the company. The former employee also alleges that Prince, quote, views himself as a Christian crusader tasked with eliminating Muslims and the Islamic faith from the globe, end quote, and that Prince's companies, quote, encouraged and rewarded the destruction of Iraqi life, end quote.
Jesus Christ.
The point here being, if you connect the dots between a number of these things, right, it's very clear that because of his upbringing, because of the beliefs of his father, and because of this fucking parochial, weird education he got, and the way that he combined it with his military experience, he sees the world in this ridiculous clash of civilization shit, which is, an entirely fucking racist, genocidal project to reinstitute the Crusades for some ridiculous religious bigotry in order to exterminate Muslims. And to that end as well, his new company that he founded, which is called the Frontier Services Group, that company's main goal, in the same way as Blackwater's was, is to provide like military and sort of logistical, mercenary work, right? And they mostly are operating in Africa. But here's the kicker. They operate in Africa mostly in conjunction with the Chinese government, because the Chinese government has a lot of various kind of like soft imperial projects all across Africa in order to try to wrest control from a lot of the, post-colonial states there that are still somehow in the orbit of their, former European colonizers. China's trying to undermine that. And so as a result, they have all these infrastructural projects, these economic things they're trying to develop and get all the rare earth minerals and shit out of a variety of different African countries. So that's where Prince's new group, Frontier Services Group, steps in. And interestingly, in addition to their work in Africa, they also are working with China in Xinjiang, in the western province in China, where, it's alleged that China basically has concentration camps open for the Uyghur population there, which incidentally also is Muslim. So it shows you that Erik Prince's motivations remain clear, right? Like, in terms of just being a fucking insane bigot who has this idea that his role in life is to be like some kind of, medieval cleansing sword to basically wreak havoc all across the Islamic world and, Islamic populations wherever.
I just have to say, Frontier Services Corp sounds like he was naming it so it should be subpoenaed. It just sounds like something that needs to be subpoenaed.
There's kind of two quick points I want to make to sort of wrap up this stuff about Prince. First of all, his net worth now, as far as I can get, is about $2.5 billion.
Fuck!
And so, as we described before, in the 90s, when his dad died, company was sold at $1.5 billion, roughly, a little bit less than that. That was probably split amongst the 4 kids and whoever else maybe had a stake in that company. So most of that money he's made vis-a-vis his contracts that he's done, first via Blackwater and now through his other, network of fucking private military companies that he's been working to set up around the world. So he's literally just a warmonger, like in the worst possible sense, right? Like even more so than like the arms manufacturers. He's like literally profiting off of the death and suffering of other people and gleefully doing it as well. And to that end, and particularly in terms of the anti-Islamic stuff, the one point I wanted to bring up here is that, like, Prince being kind of tapped, as you mentioned, Chris, as potentially becoming the fucking, viceroy of Afghanistan or whatever. It's not a surprise that this guy is coming back now.
Oh, of course.
And we've talked a lot on the show about, like, the fascist creep, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he is a fascist creep, but I mean, like, the fascist creep into society. And there's a lot of, in the academic work that I do and a lot of the literature I've read, there's a lot of like open-ended questions of like, how could this happen? Like, how could we have this kind of fascist moment in America come up, with Trump?
That clash of civilizations, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that clash of civilizations mindset you were talking about is a big part of that. And I mean, Bannon, really bought into that big time as well, which I think is, part of the reason the two of them hit it off obviously so well. But, I believe, Trump, there's a bit of that thinking, in Trump as well, a bit of that mindset.
For sure.
Yeah.
And by the way, too, on the think tanky element of it, there was an essay written called "The Clash of Civilizations" in 1994, I want to say, by this guy Samuel Huntington, and it's just utter drivel bullshit. It's one of the worst fucking essays I've ever read. But it was like seriously taken to heart by especially like the neocons.
Yeah.
But a lot of other people, like still like fucking carried water for this awful essay that tried to say that there was something like there's 5 main civilizations in the world, and it had like a fucking map where it was like the different countries were colored based on what civilization they were respective to. It was just like incredibly racist and reductive and just like the worst kind of academic dregs. Anyway, but again, to that point of you mentioning that being something that's in Bannon's thinking and Trump's thinking as well, Chris, like the point that I wanted to get to is, with this fascination and concern about stuff like the alt-right and this worry about like, where did this come from? It's been my contention for a long time that like the fucking war on terror was the most fascist thing ever.
Oh yeah.
Like at least in its rhetorical maneuvers, in the way that it played upon the psyche of America, like the fucking soul of the country, the way it was affected, the way the xenophobia was inflamed, the way the like casual militarization of daily life came into play. Like these were the forces that, predated our moment that like led to it. Like these are all part of a connective chain. And this guy, Erik Prince, has happily been a part of it his entire life and been on that side. And in addition to that, is making literally a killing off of doing this.
Yes.
Is easily, again, we could go on, I could go on forever about how fucking, what a piece of shit this man is. But he's maybe one of the worst singular human beings we've talked about on this show. Awful man. And I think he actually is being subpoenaed by Congress now. Like, as of this year. For some other, I think he also had he is somehow implicated in like the Russiagate stuff. I think he met with like Don Jr. and a couple of other...
In the Seychelles, supposedly. He met with, was it Cohen? I can't fucking remember.
A representative from the UAE that was also representing Putin's interests.
Yeah.
And the liberal media was trying to spin it into saying like, that's what's fucking funny, because the liberal media, let's just say like MSNBC and shit, was trying to, the maddest that liberals have gotten at Erik Prince was about him supposedly trying to broker some sort of back channel between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. What did not get them riled up was the fact that he has spent his time as a fucking AC-130, a billionaire AC-130, just marauding over the fucking global south for his entirety of his career, and as a Navy SEAL himself. So the maddest that they got was they're like, well, but Putin and Trump. And it wasn't the fact that he's just like spent his entire enriching himself with billions of dollars by blasting the brains of children all over public squares in the Middle East.
And also, again, to maintaining the belief that he is doing God's work, that he is a 21st century crusader. And again, that ties into the whole, like, with the alt-right stuff, there's so much aesthetics that are this poor attempt to crib meaning out of the Crusades. And I mean, it's supported by, like, a huge amount of, like, shitty historians as well, who try to make that into, like, this, like, perennial civilizational battle that must occur between the West and Islam, or Christendom and Islam, or Judeo-Christian values versus Islamic values or whatever. And it's all the same fucking nonsense racist horse shit that is just an excuse to murder and destroy other human beings. And it's so fucking despicable.
Ridiculous.
I mean, I will gladly cheer if they fucking throw him in prison for whatever stupid Russiagate bullshit. I will gladly cheer any amount of suffering that can be done to this man. Please.
Allegedly. Do you guys both feel fucking drained like I do?
My knee hurts for some weird reason. I'm not sure.
That a storm's coming in which we're talking about the Prince and Devos families every time your knee throbs? Is that what it is?
A storm is coming. I wonder if that's what it is. Am I getting like old man pains now?
A storm is coming, Mr. Prince. I don't even know how to wrap this up. Like, how would we wrap this up if we just watched like Nightmare on Elm Street, but it was actually real? I mean, I think if we had to try to like, we don't even, there's nothing to explain, but if we wanted to like try to put some sort of through line between fucking murderous Hansel and Gretel here, it's like It's like their jobs primarily, if we're putting it into a politically economic context, is to take your money and put it into their pockets and their class's pockets. As simple as it gets. They know this better than any routine MSNBC watcher because of their lack of class consciousness. Nobody has class consciousness like the elites and the ruling class. They get it. And they understand that through privatization and through concentration of power, they can take our money. They can be the sole recipients of socialist programs. What I think makes them interesting and discernible and worth of an episode is they happen to do it in the most gauche, murderous, and psychotic fucking way. What I just learned, Shane, about Erik Prince is fucking stunning to me. I can't believe that this man exists.
I mean, he's literally a war criminal, like a proven war criminal. And he gets to walk free, you know?
What's more stunning is he's like a cartoonish war criminal.
Yes, exactly. I mean, these people are like mustache-twirling vaudevillian villains. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like fucking, if you casted them in a silent movie in the 1920s, the director would be like, I don't know, Bob, it's a little too on the nose for me. It's like fucking absurd how just demented and evil they are. And you know, I was about to say some really anti-religious things. I'm not going to.
I didn't even get into like the weird religious stuff that, I mean, not, you know, I broached upon it a little bit, but like that Betsy Devos did. I mean, she's properly fucking fanatical. The whole family is properly fucking fanatical. And I Chris, as exactly as you said, when Shane was talking about Erik Prince and this like weird crusade thing, my mind went straight to Steve Bannon.
That's his whole thing.
That's his whole thing.
He's done. Yeah, he's had a couple documentaries about it even.
Yep.
Here to return to an old bit that we haven't done in a long time.
Okay.
Like,
oh no,
about like what their punishment would be in a just society.
These are people that the U.S. Marshals are protecting, but go on.
How about this? Put them in a Roman Colosseum against a couple of lions and see how long that faith holds out. Just a suggestion. I want to see Erik Prince 1v1 a bunch of exotic animals. Get all of the tigers from Joe Exotic's weird zoo, and just let Erik Prince with his grit and his faith. Let's see if he can take them on.
All right. Erik Prince versus Carol Baskin. Who wins?
The silent killer, man.
That dude is going to be tiger droppings in a weekend.
She definitely killed her husband, right?
Like, yeah, right?
Yeah, I mean, pretty clearly, right?
Yeah. I mean, more credit to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe her and Erik can compare notes on how to do it and get away with it.
Erik Prince, you son of a bitch!
Oh God! Actually, a good proper torture would be, like Alex DeLonge in A Clockwork Orange when he's being deprogrammed and shit, and Erik Prince has to watch with his eyes like spread open, has to watch all of Joe Exotic's insane, methed out fucking rants hours on end.
I would love to watch that.
Yeah, that's something
not
good.
A punishment. That sounds incredible.
I watched when we finished Tiger King, I watched it like the day after. I was like, oh, these are available, right? I can go to YouTube and see this. It's fucking nuts, dude. It's crazy. I mean, I know we talked about it, I think, on a Patreon episode or something like that. But yeah, that guy is he's got coronavirus, I guess.
Oh, does he really?
Yeah, he did, man. In federal prison. I mean, that's a whole other fucking thing. Like what's going on at Rikers and shit. Another time. We've already brought everybody to the fucking brink while they're on quarantine. So let's leave this one as is. Oh God, I don't know, man. Stay cool. Yeah. Stay cool. Try.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Stay cool.
That'll do.
And if you have the time, reach out to your loved ones. Say something nice. Google where does Erik Prince live.
Okay.
Find something good that you can do for your community.
No. Probably lives in an island mountain volcano, like fucking the man with a golden gun or something.
He also looks like shit, but I mean they all do, so it doesn't matter.
It's funny.
Anyway.
he looks like somebody had to draw like a handsome Navy SEAL from memory, but it just looks like shit, right? That's a man who is haunted by his demons.
He looks like he's about to say, "Mr. Bond, so glad you could join me."
Come, Mr. Bond. You derive as much pleasure from killing as I do. Oh, fuck. All right. Stay cool, guys. Stay cool.
Stay cool.
Take care, everybody.
When Betsy DeVos became the education boss, her mode of operation was clear. Bring down public schools, paint the teachers as fools, indifferent to their students each year. Now the schools are all closed, but the kids go to school, 'cause teachers found a way. I guess that we're okay, Betsy. Say, Betsy, we set up distance learning in a day. Betsy, we'll never leave our students scared of what their future can bring. Wouldn't you admit, Betsy, holy Betsy, the teachers in this country haven't quit. Betsy, go back to selling and wait. Teaching really isn't your thing. When people see it with their eyes, they begin to realize the magic public teachers can do. And when push comes to shove, it's the students they love. We'll support them when a nightmare comes true. So Betsy, step to the side, get out of our way, and we'll show you how it's done. I guess that we're okay, Betsy. Say, Betsy, we set up distance learning in a day. Betsy,